There's nothing in this world that anybody can ever do to me that's gonna be worse than what I've seen.
I received a call from the sheriff's department that there had been a homicide. It was very devastating. There wasn't a lot of murders in Washington County. Everyone knew everyone. They all knew Michael. They all went to school with him. Everyone knew Rita.
I was really close with my mom. She was always at my football games, my baseball games. She's always had the camcorder out. She was recording me.
Come on, son.
This murder was as brutal as they come.
The first responders called this crime scene horrific.
There's blood all over the room. Some sort of object was used to hit Rita at least once.
Mike finds her body burning on the floor of her room.
I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what to do. My name is Michael Politte, and when I was 14 years old, I was arrested for the murder of my mother.
Would either one of you ever think, and be honest with me, that he might hurt your mother?
No.
I never thought he would hurt our mom, no. She was very close with Michael. You know, he was her baby.
Tell me about December 4th, 1998. Do you remember that evening?
Vividly. I was home, and then I see headlights coming down the driveway, and it's my mom. And she comes into the house, and she said, "I love you, good night, and I'll see you in the morning."
Is that the last thing your mom ever said
That's
to
the
you?
last thing she ever said to me. Next thing I remember, I woke up, and I see a light haze in my room. I opened my door, I could see her feet, and she was on fire from the waist up. And I could hear it.
What could you hear?
Cracking of the fire.
How soon did investigators focus on Michael?
Immediately.
Immediately.
He is a suspect from the moment they arrive at the scene. They said this kid didn't act the way they expected. He wasn't emotional enough.
You look like a pretty good suspect. You were a person who loved to set fires. You had had arguments with your mother. You were having trouble in school.
But none of that suggests anything about murder.
Were there any injuries on Michael, on your brother?
None.
Any blood found on him, on
No.
his clothing?
No.
And no weapon?
No.
Let me ask you a question. What 14-year-old kid could commit a crime that violent and that vicious and not leave any forensic evidence behind whatsoever? That's not possible.
Michael was convicted of murder in the second degree.
He was sentenced to life.
Michael, did you kill your mom?
No. And there's only one individual that I know that hates her that much to do that to her.
This is where the Politte family home once stood on December 5th, 1998, the day Michael Politte says he woke up to find his mother's body lying on her bedroom floor, on fire.
What I seen was hatred and evil.
He was 14 years old.
The individual that did that to my mother hated her with everything inside of him.
Rita Politte was just 40 when she died.
There's a lot of pictures of us and Mom.
All these years later, Michael's older sisters, Crystal and Melanie, still have vivid memories.
That's Crystal, that's Mom, and that's me.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about Rita?
Her laugh.
She's always laughing, smiling.
Michael and his sisters grew up in the tiny rural community of Hopewell, Missouri. It's about 70 miles southwest of St. Louis.
We didn't lock our doors. We lived by all of our family.
We rode bicycles and motorcycles. I was happy.
Michael went by the nickname Bernie back then.
His middle name is Bernard. It's short for Bernard.
Their parents, Edward and Rita, got married as teens, and Crystal and Melanie say the couple had their struggles.
He was very mentally abusive.
He also cheated on her.
A lot.
But she loved him. Love, it outweighed any other feeling she ever had.
Eventually, though, love wasn't enough.
I witnessed violence between the two of them.
There were allegations of domestic violence on both sides. The year before the murder, there was an incident where police were called. Michael told an officer that his dad pushed his mom to the floor and choked her. The couple ultimately divorced in the summer of 1998 after more than 20 years of marriage. The divorce decree cited Edward's infidelity.
My dad would try to pay me to come live with him. I wouldn't. I wanted to live with Mom.
Michael ended up having to split time between both parents. On December 4th, 1998, he was at his mom's. That night, she was out working at a local bar, and Michael was home alone.
Probably 7, 8 or so. I get bored. I ride my bicycle down to a general store.
It's there that Michael says he met up with his friend, 15-year-old Josh Sonsasi, who he invited to sleep over. The two hung out for hours until Michael's mom got home around midnight.
I asked him, I was like, man, where do you want to sleep at? You can sleep here in the living room on a fold-out couch, or you can just sleep in, in the floor of my room. He's like, I'll just crash on your floor.
Michael says he slept through the night until just before 6:30 a.m., when he and Josh awoke and noticed smoke in the room.
We ran out of the room. My mom's bedroom door is facing me, and I could see the glow, an orange glow in that area.
He says he called out to his mom, but there was no answer.
Michael, what are you feeling at this point?
Panic, fear.
Michael says he went and grabbed a hose outside and then ran toward his mom's room. And what he saw, he'd never forget.
I seen blood on her legs, and she was on fire from the waist up. Now I turned the water hose on. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been minutes, it could have been seconds, I don't know.
Josh ran to get help, but it was too late. Crystal would soon get a call from her brother with the news.
I just sat on my bed and I just kept saying, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. Because, then it's real.
Crystal picked Melanie up, and by the time they got to the scene, police cars and fire trucks were lining the driveway.
Mike was in the front seat, passenger side of the police car. And we just ran up to the window, asked him what happened. And he had soot on his face, and he had tear marks all down his face. And he said, I don't know, Mom's dead.
You could smell the smoke, you could smell flesh.
Tammy Nash worked for the Washington County Sheriff's Office back then and was one of the responding officers. It was clear that this was a murder. Rita had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, and blood was visible on her bedroom walls, indicating a struggle had occurred. A fire marshal quickly concluded that an accelerant was used to set her on fire.
What was your job at that point? What was your assignment?
together the evidence. We was looking for anything that she could have been struck with. We never found a weapon.
While Tammy processed the scene, Michael and Josh were taken away to the sheriff's office for questioning. A police report indicates that on the way, Michael asked an officer something that quickly put him under suspicion. He asked, "What's going to happen to my mom's truck?"
Isn't that an odd thing to say after you just saw your mother on fire?
I don't think so.
When you lose someone, you want to hang on to things. To me, that's all it was, you know, and our mom loved that truck.
But it did raise eyebrows. And at the sheriff's office, Michael was given a voice stress test.
And then they told me that I failed.
Investigators also took Michael's shoes so that an accelerant-sniffing dog could examine them.
They said the dog alerted to my shoes to an accelerant.
How would you describe the tone of the questioning after the dogs alerted on your shoes and after you failed this voice stress test?
They wasn't questioning me no more. They were telling me that I did something.
Michael and Josh both insisted they didn't know what happened to Rita, that they had stayed in Michael's room all night. But investigators told them they didn't believe them. The boys were questioned repeatedly. And 2 days after the murder, Josh gave a videotaped statement with an officer on each side and his mother present. That statement seemed to poke a hole in Michael's account. He said he woke up to a noise in the middle of the night.
I heard a little thud, and I thought I heard like a woman's voice.
Did Bernie wake up too, or did you see Bernie in the room at that time?
No,
Bernie wasn't in bed.
I didn't see him.
Could you have seen him if he was?
And you looked at
Is that yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no doubt he wasn't in bed. Okay. And was he anywhere else in that bedroom?
No.
Shortly after Josh gave that statement on December 7th, 1998, 14-year-old Michael Politte was arrested for his mother's murder.
I always believed that I was going to be found innocent because I didn't have anything to do with what happened to my mother. Oh, was I in for a rude awakening?
He looks like a really happy kid.
He was always really happy.
When Melanie and Crystal learned that their 14-year-old brother had been arrested for their mother's murder, they say they couldn't believe it.
How are they coming up with that conclusion? I just thought they were crazy.
He didn't do it, no one him cleared.
Chuck and Patsy Skiles are Michael's uncle and aunt. They live next door to where the crime took place. They also felt police had made a mistake.
You know, we was the first ones to see him after it happened. He had no scratches, no nothing on him.
He's always giving his mom a hug.
He loved his mom.
But while Michael's family believed in his innocence, the truth is, Michael was hardly the model child, something that even he admits.
You failed 7th grade 3 times?
Yeah, I was on my 3rd year because I became truant. I just wasn't going.
Skipping school is one thing, but 10 months before the murder, things got so bad that Michael was hospitalized for behavioral issues after he threatened to kill his mother and himself.
For whatever reason, I told her that I would put her 6 feet under just like her mom and dad.
Did you mean that, Michael?
No, I didn't. And it's the biggest regret of my life.
Melanie and Crystal blame Michael's misbehavior on their parents' divorce.
Our dad would kind of put him in the middle.
Michael was clearly an angry, troubled teenager.
Yeah, I think he was mad at our dad for sure.
Was he mad at your mom as well?
No, I know they didn't always get along perfectly. I don't think any parent and child does.
3 years passed with Michael in custody awaiting trial. And then the prosecution came to him with a deal: plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter and he'd spend a maximum of 15 years in prison.
I rejected it.
You didn't think about it?
Nope.
Why not?
Because I didn't murder my mother.
In January 2002, Michael Politte, then 17 years old, went on trial. His life was on the line. The prosecutors and defense attorney who tried the case didn't respond to our calls. But Josh Hedgecorth, the current prosecutor of Washington County, where the murder took place, was willing to talk about the case.
What was the most important evidence?
The scientific evidence, and that would start with the shoes that he was wearing at the sheriff's office.
Not only had a dog detected an accelerant on Michael's shoes, according to the prosecution, later testing also confirmed the presence of gasoline on them, and there was testimony that an accelerant had been used to burn Rita's body.
And so all of these components together, I think, solidified that he must have set the fire.
But Michael had told police that gasoline found on his shoes meant nothing, and that he and his friends would often set fires for fun.
But we all did that. It was in the country.
In fact, Michael told police that just hours before the murder, he and his friend Josh used gasoline to set a fire on the railroad tracks near his house before Rita got home.
It does show the persistence with fire.
But the prosecution used that admission as another piece of evidence against Michael.
See the heavy charring in it?
They argued the burn pattern on the tracks matched the burn pattern on Rita.
See the outlets showing nothing electrical that could have caused the fire.
Linda Dickerson Bell and Jonathan Peterson were jurors on the case.
I'm like, it's not looking good for him.
What they were telling us was that Michael had a problem with burning and that he was the only person that could have done this.
The jurors never heard about Michael's problems at school and that threat to his mother, but a witness testified about a disagreement that Michael had with his mother weeks before the murder. It was over money, and he sat flicking a lighter afterwards.
It happened, but not in the way that the state portrayed it. I was flicking the wheel on the lighter. That's that.
You weren't threatening your mother with that?
No.
And there was something even more damaging. The prosecution claimed that Michael had actually confessed to the crime during a suicide attempt at a juvenile detention center exactly 1 month after the murder. 3 witnesses who worked there wrote in reports that Michael said, "I haven't cared since I killed my mom." But Michael says that's not what he said.
When they asked you why you were trying to kill yourself, you said what?
I haven't cared since they killed my mom.
It's the difference of one word, but that one word carried a lot of weight, and the jury would never hear from Michael because when it was the defense's turn, he didn't take the stand.
Today's date is the 7th day of December, 1998.
And leaving the jury with even more unanswered questions was the fact that they were told that Josh, the other boy in the house that night, had been granted immunity.
I kept waiting, thinking, okay, well, if he's been given immunity, then he's got to have something to offer.
But the jury never saw or heard from Josh at all. He wasn't called to the stand, and they were never shown his videotape statement. Michael's sisters also weren't called.
But I never really heard anybody in his defense say Michael didn't do this.
Instead, the defense hinged its case on the lack of direct evidence. No murder weapon had been found, and despite the violence of the attack, Michael had no injuries and no blood on his clothing. After 3 days of testimony, the case went to the jury.
To hold someone's life in your hand, have you ever done that? It's not a pleasant thing to do. I wanted to get it right.
But Linda and Jonathan say they were left with so many questions, too many questions, and they felt pressured by other members of the jury.
I think everybody finally just got to me and was just like, you know, we're ready to go home. And then I was like, yeah, but you're ready to go home and this kid's ready to go to prison.
After more than 4 hours, the jury filed into the courtroom with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder.
I wept.
Why?
Because it was wrong.
Michael was sentenced to life in prison.
It was unbelievable. I never thought it would happen.
Michael would spend years in a Missouri prison before a new team of lawyers would take his case and make it their mission to turn it around.
The state essentially never really had any case against this kid, but the case that they even did have back at trial has been indisputably proven false.
After Michael Politte was convicted and sentenced to life at the age of 18, he was sent to the Missouri State Penitentiary, once called the bloodiest 47 acres in America.
Being so young, I was a target. I got in a fight my first day there. Dudes were trying to rape me.
Michael says he became desperate for some sense of safety.
You became a skinhead?
Yeah, joined a gang.
That's where you got the tattoos?
Yeah. It was something that I felt like I needed to do to survive. It's not the way that I feel. It's not the way that Mom raised me. I just didn't fit in.
Michael says he longed to prove his innocence and get out of prison. He needed to hire a lawyer, so he says he asked his dad for help.
Did he?
Nope.
So how did you keep up any hope at all?
I didn't. For a few years, I was a heroin addict. Anytime I left my cell, I was looking for drugs. I was just self-medicating.
That's the way things were until Michael finally found something that gave him hope. 5 years after his conviction, he wrote a letter to the Midwest Innocence Project, and they agreed to take his case. The organization worked on it for years, and eventually attorneys Tricia Bushnell, Megan Crane, and Mark Emerson became involved.
Mike was convicted because he was a kid, pure and simple. They said he wasn't emotional enough. Trauma doesn't look like what people think it should look like.
Tricia, Megan, and Mark picked apart the case against Michael. They say it was based on bad science.
The breaker's tripped.
Starting with the prosecution's claim that an accelerant was used to set the fire that killed Rita.
When the fire investigator came to the scene, they immediately determined it was a fuel-fed fire based on just visual patterns, just based on looking at the scene, which at the time violated gold standards of fire investigation. There has to be lab testing.
Control sample taken there.
And lab testing was done on carpet samples from the crime scene. No accelerant was detected. The prosecution explained that away by saying it could have burned up. But defense attorney Megan Crane says that suggestion isn't reasonable.
There's no scientific basis for that being possible.
Do you believe that the jury believed that, in fact, there was an accelerant used to set Rita on fire?
Absolutely. The main case against Michael was that it was a gasoline fire. And in order to attempt to tie Mike to the crime, the only physical evidence was the gasoline that the state alleged was on his shoes.
But Michael's new lawyers say that Michael's shoes didn't have gasoline on them either.
Another footprint found.
They say a chemical used in the shoe manufacturing process was wrongly identified as gasoline at trial. And even the Missouri State Crime Lab agrees. In this 2020 letter, officials say it is now known that solvents found in footwear adhesives have similarities to gasoline, but that in the late 1990s, this knowledge was not widely known.
Could the dogs have been alerting to the chemicals used in the shoes?
Absolutely.
The jurors cared about the gas on the shoes. They asked to see the shoes. It was the nail in the coffin.
But what about Michael's alleged confession at the juvenile detention center? Witnesses wrote that they heard him say, "I haven't cared since I killed my mom." But Michael insists he said, "I haven't cared since they killed my mom."
In the same way we talk about tunnel vision, people can hear what they want to hear. We're talking about one word in a room where there's lots of activity happening. They have a kid in the detention center that they believe has probably committed this crime, right? And so that's their view of him.
There is one big question that remains. What about Josh Sanssouci? Remember, the jury was told he got immunity. And there was that videotaped statement where he told police that he woke up in the middle of the night and Michael wasn't there.
So there's no doubt he wasn't in bed. Okay. And was he anywhere else in that bedroom? No.
Now, many years after the crime, Josh is speaking publicly for the first time about what he says really happened that night.
I've spent the majority of my life just trying to forget about it. I've done pretty good just moving on with it. But I mean, it's always there, you know.
Josh Sanssouci is now 39 years old. He says he's never been quite the same since he woke up from that sleepover at Michael's at the age of 15 and found himself in the middle of a murder investigation. He says he was questioned by police repeatedly for hours at a time.
Every time I tell them something, they would be like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. I remember telling my mom, I said, they keep saying that I'm lying. I said, I don't even know if I'm telling the truth anymore.
But the truth, Josh says, is that nothing out of the ordinary happened on that night in question.
It was just like a normal night.
I couldn't sleep very good that night. I was just kind of waking up. I woke up one time.
But what about that videotaped statement where Josh told police that he woke up in the middle of the night and Michael wasn't there?
So there's no doubt he wasn't in bed. Okay. And was he anywhere else in that bedroom? No.
I don't remember ever saying that. And I feel like if I said that, then it was maybe at a weak point or something.
Michael's attorneys say they've seen this all too often in interrogations.
What we see in Josh's interrogation is the result of hours and hours of interrogation. And every other time, he has never, ever said that that was what happened.
In a deposition right before Michael went on trial, Josh said that he never sat up from where he was sleeping on the floor and that it's not that I did not see him in his bed, it's I couldn't see him in his bed.
There's no way I could see anything that's on top of the bed.
So why did Josh take that immunity deal?
I just wanted it because I knew they was gonna try to pin it on me or Bernie. I was like, well, if they'll give me immunity, then maybe I don't have anything to worry about, you know?
Michael's lawyers say the prosecution was likely trying to get Josh to flip on Michael. And the fact they didn't even put Josh on the stand says it all.
They didn't call him because it wasn't going to go well for them. He had nothing helpful to say for the state.
Why didn't the defense call Josh?
That's a great question, Erin. And there's a lot of great questions about what the defense didn't do and who they didn't call.
Michael's trial attorney was a public defender back then. In a court affidavit, he admits that Michael's case was the first homicide case that he had tried on his own, and that today he would handle his representation of Michael differently. Michael's new legal team was committed to getting him out of prison. They filed court documents suggesting an alternative suspect, Michael's father, Edward Politte.
I believe he is responsible for what happened to my mother.
If that's true, that means Michael's own father stood by and let his son take the fall for a murder that he was behind. Michael's sisters say their father was furious over the financial terms of the divorce. A judge had finalized them just 4 days before the murder.
She got half of his retirement. Maintenance, child support,
He actually
alimony. And the one thing that I remember about growing up with our dad is you don't mess with his money. You just don't do it.
He had an outburst in the court. He said, "You'll never live to see a dime of that money."
Police did interview Edward Politte after the murder. He had an alibi. He was home more than 80 miles away at the time of the murder. But Michael's defense team says investigators didn't look hard enough.
They didn't at all investigate the possibility that perhaps Ed did this with someone else.
And Michael says he believes his dad did arrange the murder and had help.
I think he hired Johnny to murder my mother.
Johnny is Johnny Politte, Edward's cousin. Michael's legal team identified witnesses who placed Johnny near the crime scene on the morning of the murder, just as first responders were arriving.
Well, I'd heard sirens, and as I'm coming up the road and I'm approaching the railroad tracks, Johnny Politte was walking down the railroad tracks.
Larry Lee is one of those witnesses. He's known Johnny for years.
As he's walking up to my truck, he asked me if I heard about Rita. He said somebody killed her. And I'm like, dude, what?
About a week later, Larry's wife Carolyn says Johnny came to their door.
And it was like 6 o'clock in the morning. He said, "I need to know what you know about Rita's death." He said, "Me and Edward are doing our own investigation, and we heard you were up at the store talking about it." And I said, "Johnny, I don't know nothing." "No, we need to know what you know," he said. And I said, "You know, I think it's time for you to go."
Were you scared?
A little bit.
Did the two of you talk to investigators about this?
No. We think back now, and we wish we would have.
And I ain't saying he had anything to do with anything either. I don't know. But, you know.
Another man places Johnny Politte's truck near the same spot that Larry Lee says he ran into Johnny on the morning of the murder. In an affidavit filed by Michael's team, the man says he saw the truck just as emergency vehicles were coming down the road. Former investigator Tammy Nash says she doesn't remember hearing that Johnny Politte had been seen that morning, but she does recall something that happened in the days after the murder, once the crime scene had been released.
Somebody came in to the sheriff's department and said that they had found a tire iron or tire tool or something in the closet.
Whose closet?
Michael's closet.
Police records show the person who found that tire tool was Johnny Politte.
Could you have missed that in your first search?
No.
Are you absolutely sure?
I am positive. I did not miss that.
If it wasn't there when you searched, what does that mean?
That somebody placed it there.
Tammy went and retrieved the tire tool from Michael's closet. It was later ruled out as the murder weapon.
Do you believe that tire iron was put in your closet to set you up?
I do.
Johnny and Edward Politte didn't respond to our request for an interview. Neither has been charged in the case. It's been years since Michael and his sisters have spoken to their father, but they say they did ask him whether he had anything to do with their mother's murder, and he denied it.
It's not our job and it's not our focus to say who did commit this crime, but what we do know is it was not Michael Politte.
And while Michael's lawyers were trying to prove that, the case would take a turn.
Best day in the world.
I never thought this day would come.
It's amazing.
Take an in-depth look at the case at 48hours.
It's hard. It's real hard here in Missouri to get these convictions overturned. It's a battle.
I don't know why they don't want to have a hearing.
Michael's legal team was shut down by appeals courts at every turn.
It is a constant fight with, Goliath, really, is what it feels like.
Despite the letdowns, Michael and his sisters kept up hope that one day he would be freed. And in 2021, there was an unexpected development. A bill passed in Missouri giving juvenile offenders convicted of serious crimes a second chance.
It gave me an immediate parole hearing.
Michael went before the parole board asking for his release.
I told him I was innocent, and I told him this is why I'm innocent, and this is why you should believe I'm innocent.
It worked. On April 22nd, 2022, Melanie and Crystal brought friends and family and a change of clothes to the Jefferson City Correctional Center.
It was a really great day.
It was a dream come true, really.
On that day, Michael Politte walked out of prison.
I love you. I love you.
Incarcerated at just 14 years old,
Oh, man, I love you guys, man.
he was now 38.
Where's my lawyers?
It's overwhelming to see all the love. And all the nights sitting in my cell wondering what it would be like to be out here and have this moment and have it finally come true. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's finally here.
I'm free.
How you doing? Can I have a hug?
Michael says he felt his mom's presence when a bird flew by overhead.
It's mine. Hey, Mom. She's always in my thoughts. She's always in my mind. And everything I do and everything that I process through today is guided by her.
Michael left prison that day doing one of the things he enjoyed most before he went in.
We're going to take a bike ride from the parking lot to the railroad tracks. You ready to go, man? I'm ready. Well, I'm leaving here the same way that I came in here, riding a bicycle. Justice for Rita. Let's go. Let's go, man.
Felt good. It was the best bike ride in the world.
Welcome home, Mike.
This is it.
Welcome home.
Following his release, Michael moved in with his sister Melanie.
You ready?
Drum roll. Hey, it's Looney Tunes.
He started getting those reminders of prison, his tattoos, covered up with this new art. He also found a job as a carpenter and got his driver's license.
You're now out. Is that enough?
No, it ain't enough.
Because as you sit right now, you are a convicted felon on parole.
Yep.
You have a criminal record that says you killed your mother.
Yep.
Michael wants to clear his name, and it just might happen because Josh Hedgecorth, the current prosecutor in the county where the murder took place, has filed a motion asking for Michael's conviction to be overturned.
To me, it always comes back to the science.
Hedgecorth agrees with Michael's attorneys that the scientific evidence used to convict Michael is problematic.
So I don't believe that Michael received a fair trial. I can't say that the prosecutor at the time knew what he was putting on was false. It just shouldn't have been presented.
Could you retry Michael Politte for the murder of his mother based on the evidence you have today?
On the evidence I have today, I don't believe I would file this case.
But while the local prosecutor believes Michael's conviction should be thrown out, another public official, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt, is fighting it.
In every exoneration in Missouri, the Attorney General fights it because they say we have to respect, honor, and protect the verdict of these jurors. Well, that goes out the window when the jurors themselves want this verdict overturned.
In sworn affidavits, 5 jurors have questioned whether Michael got a fair trial, including Jonathan Peterson and Linda Dickerson Bell.
I do not believe that Michael Politte killed his mother, but I don't know how to fix it.
The Attorney General's office didn't reply to our request for comment, but in a court filing, they say that Michael cannot meet the standard for actual innocence. And the AG has argued that the evidence against Johnny and Edward Politte would have been inadmissible at trial.
There you go.
Michael hopes that a judge will hear the case and decide to overturn his conviction. But in the meantime, Prosecutor Josh Hedgecorth has revealed to us that the local sheriff's department has reopened the investigation into Rita's murder.
We want to do the right thing. If someone else did this, we want to know that. Even if it's new evidence that it was Michael.
Neither Hedgecorth nor the local sheriff would comment on the specifics of the investigation, including whether Johnny Politte or Edward Politte are persons of interest.
I feel bad for Bernie and his family. I mean, everything they had to go through. And Bernie lost his whole childhood.
Josh Sanssouci hasn't seen Michael Politte since they were kids, but they hope to one day reunite. The night of that sleepover and its aftermath has haunted Josh all these years.
What would you say to him?
I'm sorry, and that, you know, he didn't do anything wrong.
In Potosi, Missouri, not far from where the murder took place, Rita's truck has sat all these years.
It's gonna need new tires.
So much smaller than I remember.
Her family says they held on to it because it's one of the only things they have left of her.
That's her truck. You know, it's part of her. That belongs to her.
They hope to fix it up and get it running again.
We're gonna get justice for her. I believe that one day. We're gonna get justice for Rita.
Personally, I could sort of relate to Kathy Blair and just thinking about what that would be like as a woman to be home alone.
That is the boogeyman story
It
for
is.
every woman,
It's
right?
awful.
An intruder is in your house.
Yeah.
Someone is stabbing you.
What's happening in Texas? My mom is dead. Someone broke in and killed my mom.
This is a case that sticks with you throughout your life. My name is Derek Israel. I was working in the homicide unit when this case occurred.
My name's Kerry Scanlon, and I was the lead investigator on the Kathy Blair murder.
Kathy was a larger than life. She's my big sister. I have always thought everything Kathy did was amazing. How would you describe her from a student's perspective?
She was so kind, just believed in me wholeheartedly. It still makes no sense.
Who kills a choir director? Who does that?
A monster.
I get notified that there's been another murder. The victims are an elderly couple.
They were the best parents you could ever want.
They were just sweet people, like anybody's grandmother and grandfather.
Right from the get-go, it started sounding really familiar.
It's so violent, and it's eerily similar to Kathy Blair's.
And when we saw the connection, we just continued to work the investigations together.
You know, Kerry and I both kind of came to the conclusion that there was a serial killer working here in Austin.
I was out testing a thermal scope. I needed to get some video of some deer.
Rob Leaf has this thermal imaging scope. It's a night vision rifle scope.
So I saw the car pull up and park. I zoomed in with the scope, and by the time I had zoomed in, someone had gotten out, walked over to the sidewalk.
That is just unbelievably chilling.
The last thing they were expecting was high-resolution thermal video.
This video showed the murderer walking towards Kathy Blair's house.
The actual killer?
The actual killer.
These days in Texas, it seems like all roads lead to Austin. The sleek skyline of the Lone Star capital glittering. A boomtown that welcomes newcomers chasing dreams. It's a city charged with life, an unlikely place to find tragedy as dark as the death of a dreamer like Kathy Blair.
She loved life. You loved being around her.
What were the things that were important to her?
She had, I think, a sense of justice, right and wrong.
Kirsten Matheson is Kathy's younger sister.
She was bossy.
And even as kids in California, it was clear Kathy had a passion.
She was always singing. She had a God-given talent, which was her voice.
It was music that led Kathy to Austin.
Kathy went to UT Austin to get her master's degree in vocal performance. She loved Austin.
But love didn't always work out for Kathy. She divorced twice. Still, her affair with Austin held firm. And by 2013, Kathy was renting a house on a quiet street here on Tamarack Trail.
It was home. She loved the people here. She loved the vibe.
In a city known around the world for music, Kathy Blair fit right in. She had melody and rhythm in her soul. But you wouldn't find her singing the blues here on Austin's famed 6th Street. Instead, she chose a more spiritual stage for her talents.
Christian Choral Society was a positive social setting. The kids were kind to each other.
Barbara Sally's daughter was one of hundreds of students touched by Kathy's talent as a choir director and teacher.
I think she lived, breathed, ate, slept music.
Barbara, along with Kathy's student, Kristen DeGroot, met with us to share their memories of Kathy.
She was so kind, just believed in me wholeheartedly, which was something I really needed.
And for Kristen, Kathy was a role model.
She and I were the same. Music needed to be in our lives or we would die.
She was their teacher and their mentor. One of her friends called it the Kathy Nation.
The Kathy Nation?
The Kathy Nation.
It was December 6th, 2014. Kathy's son Joe was staying with her while waiting for his assignment from the Navy. After a night out, he came home to Tamarack Trail. What he found was shattering and echoed across that Kathy Nation.
I think my mom is dead. There's a lot of blood. I think someone broke in and killed my mom.
Joe, what's your mom's name?
Her name is Kathy Blair.
This case was clearly different, really, right from the get-go.
Starting with the location.
Oh, this is a nice neighborhood. This is a place where people, I think, feel safe.
Up until this case, which would frighten and chill Austin and shock veteran detectives Scanlon and Israel.
One of the first things I thought of, I'm like, well, why this house?
Yeah, why this house?
There's nothing that makes this house stand out from all the other ones. This is the living room right here.
Then, in Kathy Blair's bedroom,
there's a full-size jewelry case right here. Large drawers. All the drawers have been pulled out and they're stacked up. So it's like someone dumped them out and then put them in a pile right here.
Someone who had time to do that.
Correct.
A jewel thief who had time. Because Kathy Blair was already dead.
This murder started right here on the bed.
53-year-old Kathy Blair lay alone, asleep in her own bed. She awoke to the ultimate nightmare.
Yeah, Kathy Blair fought like hell.
Choked, stabbed, and finally slashed across the neck.
The wound is a fatal wound, but she still has time, to put up that fight.
She fought for her life. Kathy's here, and there's blood all around her.
So much blood that it formed the timeline of a murder.
There's a light switch, and on that light switch we saw blood, like a blood swipe. That told us that the perpetrator had come in here after the murder and switched that light on. There are more blood swipes on these drawers. And that tells me the murder of Kathy Blair occurs before these drawers were removed.
Word soon spread across Austin and across Kathy Nation.
I just said, no, that's not what happened. That cannot possibly be what happened.
Was Kathy Blair the kind of woman who might have an enemy who would do that?
No. She didn't have a malicious bone in her body.
Why does someone come in here and murder someone in order to steal a little bit of jewelry? It doesn't make sense.
It would be the first in a hideous series of senseless events.
It's just one of those moments where you're in disbelief. You think you're living in a dream. This does not happen.
But it did happen, and the killer left almost no evidence, no DNA. No fingerprints.
No fingerprints.
And no blood from the killer.
No.
Israel and Scanlon would need all their street smarts and then some, because just 9 days later,
I get notified that there's been another murderer.
For Austin detectives Israel and Scanlon, images of Kathy Blair's death were harrowing.
Attacked in the middle of the night, and it was a really horrific scene.
But there was no physical evidence from a killer who made virtually no mistakes, and that meant there was no clear suspect. Then suddenly the search for a suspect changed in a way no one could imagine. It was around 1:30 a.m. on the night that Kathy Blair died. One of her neighbors was out for a late-night walk. What he saw and what he did would give the detectives their first big break in the case.
I was out testing a thermal scope. I needed to get some video of some deer, and we've got some deer up and down the street.
Rob Leaf lived a few short blocks from Kathy Blair.
So it's a thermal scope, so it picks up a heat signature.
Wow. It's like daytime. Except it was the dead of night, and Rob was only looking for deer.
I saw the headlights of a car coming up. I saw the car pull up and park, and
On this street?
On this street.
Rob kept recording. This is video he recorded that night with a scope like this one.
I zoomed in with the scope, and by the time I had zoomed in, someone had gotten out and walked over to the sidewalk.
You can flip the setting to red to see the image more clearly. Did you focus in on the car?
I first focused in on the person, and he turns left on Tamarack.
Kathy Blair's street. The next day, Rob flew to Las Vegas on a planned trip with old friends.
Reading the news on my phone and saw a murder story. I clicked on it, and I saw the address.
Rob raced back to Austin. He checked the video of that stranger on his street.
And I called Austin Police.
And how important does the video end up being in Kathy Blair's case?
Very, very important.
The video was tantalizing, but blank on images that did not give off heat. So you couldn't actually identify the man, a license plate number, or even if there was anyone else inside the vehicle. Still, there was one important clue.
It gave us an idea of what kind of vehicle our murder suspect arrived at the crime scene with, and it was a sedan of some sort.
These cops needed much more evidence. Then, 9 days after Kathy Blair's murder, in another peaceful Austin neighborhood just 15 minutes from Kathy's home, they would get it.
The victims are an elderly couple, murdered overnight.
Viciously.
Viciously.
Sidney Jr., Johnny, and Brenda want their parents to be remembered as the outstanding people they were, not the grim headlines they became. Billy and Sidney Shelton were hardworking and happily married for 64 years.
We were never rich, but not once did Daddy ever complain about it. Not once did Mama ever complain about it.
A life well lived and peacefully slowing down. Billy was 83, her husband Sidney, 85.
These are sweet people that'll, send you on your way with some cookies.
Home nurse Dow Catrola was making her scheduled visit on December 15, 2014.
I knocked, nobody answered. Front door was splintered. It was clearly had been busted open.
Dow nervously headed to the Sheltons' modest bedroom.
And their room had been ransacked. And then to the left, I saw him on the bed, and I ran. I just turned around and I ran.
Sidney and Billy Shelton had been beaten and stabbed. The knife is still present in one of the victims.
That's correct.
Is it clear that it's also a burglary?
Yeah, I was seeing some of the same things.
The same things found at Kathy Blair's murder scene, starting with an empty jewelry box.
And again, the drawers were pulled out, they had been emptied and stacked.
3 people had been slaughtered in their own beds. The crime scenes were eerily similar, and investigators were privately wondering, was there a serial killer loose on the streets of Austin?
If word gets out that there's a serial killer, it kicks it to an entirely different level.
So investigators kept their worst fears to themselves. But why would any killer target Kathy or Billy and Sidney, who cops determined didn't even know each other?
None of these people had any enemies that we could figure out. What is it that connects these people together besides the killer?
Every lead was chased down. Then, almost 3 weeks after Kathy was killed, the name of a stranger surfaced. Tim Parlin. He'd done yard work at Kathy's house, and a friend reported Parlin was weird and rude.
I go to our computer system.
It was a simple and easy search. Tim Parlin had spent decades in prison.
And he stole jewelry.
And he stole jewelry.
Specifically jewelry.
At night.
Are you hopeful at this point?
Yeah, I am.
So this is the in-town suites. Tim Parlin, where he was living at the time the murders happened.
Israel and Scanlon went to look up the lifelong convict. The detectives snapped these photos of Tim Parlin.
I told him, we're homicide detectives.
So he asked us a few questions as well.
About the murder?
Well, yeah, like, so how'd she die?
Wow, that's bold.
Stuff like that.
He's sussing it out to see
what we know.
Cat and mouse.
It is.
Parlin spoke to the cops in the hotel's parking lot, but when they asked to see his room, he refused, claiming his wife was inside and asleep. And you drive away, and what's the conversation?
I said, this is our guy.
You did?
Yeah, and Derek says, I don't know yet.
A return trip to the in-town suites just a few days later pays off. Parlin wasn't home, but his wife was.
Explain what we were investigating, and she knew the Sheltons. His wife knew the Sheltons.
Tim Parlin's wife knew the Sheltons from church, and Tim Parlin had worked in Kathy Blair's yard. It was tenuous, but it was a connection.
She gave us permission to search the apartment.
Did you find anything?
We did, a pawn receipt.
This is that pawn receipt.
For a piece of jewelry, a nugget pendant. And it turns out that pendant belonged to Kathy Blair. It was pawned on the same night that Kathy Blair was murdered.
We found out that his sister had a green Toyota.
Parlin had been using his sister's car, a green Toyota. Its outline appeared similar to the car in Rob Leaf's video, and one caught on security footage approaching that Austin pawn shop less than 24 hours after Kathy was murdered.
We took it, we had it towed.
Towed and tested. On the passenger seat, traces of dried blood.
Blood belonged to Kathy Blair that was in that car.
Austin was on edge,
Kathy Blair was found dead inside her home,
hoping for an arrest.
The wait for justice has been troubling for her students, family, and friends. My name is Hema Muller, and I'm an anchor at CBS Austin News. It was very, very shocking in the community, and it was really unsettling.
But now justice was closing in on one man, Tim Parlin.
But you're thinking one guy still.
Oh, yeah.
When Kathy Blair's blood was found in Tim Parlin's car, detectives Israel and Scanlon were convinced that he had killed her.
At that point, we're all jubilant. We're super excited. We got our guy.
Parlin fit the bill perfectly. He had done yard work for Kathy Blair and was a career criminal with a long rap sheet of burglaries.
Now I just need to question him, confront him. Hopefully he'll confess, but if he doesn't, we have hard physical evidence to tie this guy to the murder.
Israel had Parlin arrested for an unrelated parole violation and brought in for questioning.
Seemed like a pretty short and straight road to charging Tim Parlin with murder. It turned out it wasn't a short road, and it certainly wasn't a straight road.
The first step was to get Parlin to corroborate some of the details of Kathy's murder.
I just straight up told him that, we knew that he had killed Kathy Blair.
What's his response?
I didn't do it. And this was the thing he really liked to say. These hands didn't kill anyone.
So the detectives asked him who did, but Parlin wasn't giving up that information so easily.
So after hours of this conversation, he finally says, okay, I'll tell you who it was. And that's when he said, Sean Gant-Benalcazar.
Who is that?
That's what I said. Who is that?
Did you think he was stalling?
Oh, yeah. This sounded completely made up. And I knew as soon as he said it that he had screwed us.
Because now you had to go
Because now we got to
down.
go hunt some mystery guy down and prove that he didn't commit a murder.
With their lead suspect behind bars for now, the detectives reluctantly contacted Parlin's mystery man. Sean Gant-Benalcazar had never been in trouble with the law. He had a degree in microbiology, was once a high school science teacher, and seemed an unlikely acquaintance of a serial jewel thief.
This guy lived in Galveston. He didn't cause any trouble.
Gant-Benalcazar readily agreed to meet with them that night at the Galveston Police Department.
Go see the cops there. All right. We're investigating a murder in Austin, and in particular, we're looking at Tim Parlin as the person that we believe committed the murder.
I'm completely in the dark on this. Who was murdered?
He tells the detectives he barely knows Parlin, that he just met him a few months earlier when his sister began dating Parlin's nephew.
So we started talking, okay, well, when's the last time you were in Austin? Well, I've been in Austin a few times for the last month. He was in town during the weekends of both of those murders. And on top of it, he was staying with Tim Parlin.
The thing is, honestly, I want to help you guys out because this guy, wolf in sheep's clothing, basically, didn't tell me anything about his past. And I'm starting to feel like he set me up like a patsy or something.
The detectives knew from Parlin's criminal record that he did have a history of being a master manipulator.
Did Tim ever approach you about doing burglaries?
And before long, the mystery man who initially said he knew nothing slowly started to crack. Gant-Benalcazar now says he was sitting in the car when Parlin went into Kathy Blair's house.
So where are you sitting in the car?
Passenger seat.
Well, if he's sitting in the passenger seat, then why is there blood in the passenger seat?
But Gant-Benalcazar had an explanation. He says Parlin came back to the car clutching a bloody pillowcase.
Came back with a sack, had blood on it, threw it in the passenger floorboard, and I took a peek at it, had jewelry in it, and I didn't want anything to do with it.
When did you figure out that it had something to do with the murder?
The fact that it had blood on it was not a good sign.
Then, about 4 hours into the interview,
No, I'm just wondering, is the restroom?
as he walked down a hallway,
And he was walking in front of me. I looked up and it just, I got a chill because I was like, that's the same walk as the guy in the video.
Remember that spooky thermal video that the cops think accidentally caught Kathy Blair's killer ambling down the sidewalk?
You know, it's just the broadness, the deliberate steps. I thought it was him. I definitely believed it could be him.
Was it actually Gant-Benalcazar and not Parlin who had gone into Kathy's house?
We started pursuing, you know, the line of questioning along the lines of maybe he was in the house.
Did he bully you into going into the house, or? I was scared, and you know, he was taking a threatening tone. He told me to go in the house and get the stuff.
And finally, he admitted, I did go into the house, and I did steal the jewelry.
Came in through where? The back door, you said?
Yeah, it was open.
Okay. Open, unlocked?
Unlocked, yeah. I looked around and kind of prowled and snuck through quietly. And I turned on a couple lights in rooms where I didn't see her. I found the room where she was, and she was fast asleep. That was the room her jewelry box was in.
Okay.
And so I opened the jewelry box, took the stuff out, put it in the thing. Maybe he went back, I don't know, but I didn't kill her.
Yeah, I told him that's impossible. Everything you said is true, except that it's not possible she was still alive when you left. And I explained that the person who turned on those light switches you talked about turning on, the person who removed that pillowcase you talked about removing, the person who removed those drawers you talked about removing, that person had Kathy Blair's blood on his hands. So the person who did all that killed Kathy Blair. I kept pushing him for the reason. Something happened in that room when you were there. What happened? And that's when he said, I was standing there, I was looking at her.
With no room left to lie, he breaks down.
She woke up, she lunged at me, grabbed the knife, started trying to wrestle it out of my hand. And then it was a struggle, and I stabbed her in the neck.
The confession came unexpectedly. The witness was now the prime suspect.
We had gone to clear the guy, and instead he confessed to capital murder.
Gant-Benalcazar kept talking and claimed that after murdering Kathy Blair, he handed off her jewelry to Parlin.
You didn't get to keep any of it? No, he didn't give me anything. I got nothing. You're gonna have to ask him where he fenced it.
Sean Gant-Benalcazar appears to have gained absolutely nothing from this senseless murder.
I've never met anyone who would go into someone's house and sneak in at night and murder them in their bed.
For what reason?
None. For their own gratification. That's it.
We're going to place you under arrest for capital murder.
Detectives immediately read Gant-Benalcazar his rights, but they still wanted to learn what he knew about the murder of the Sheltons.
We started talking again, asked him about the Sheltons.
Try as they might, Gant-Benalcazar wasn't talking anymore.
Well, I wasn't there for that one. I don't know anything about that one. By this point, everyone is exhausted. So eventually, he terminated the interview.
He said, I'm done.
Done.
Wish this all had never happened.
After the arrest, Detective Scanlon made this video of Gant-Benalcazar on his cell phone. His hunch seemed right.
That's the moment that you think it's him.
That's when I thought it was him.
2 men are in jail in connection with the murder of a beloved choir teacher.
4 days later, Austin police announced that they had made 2 arrests.
30-year-old Sean Gant-Benalcazar of Galveston is charged with capital murder.
49-year-old Timothy Parlin is also expected to face charges related to Blair's murder. Sean Gant-Benalcazar, he was a UT graduate. He had no criminal record of any kind. How did he get involved with a crime like this?
Tim Parlin had an answer. Later, while in custody, Parlin admitted to the cops that he had driven Gant-Benalcazar to Kathy Blair's house and to the Shelton residence on the nights they were murdered. And Parlin says he knew all along that Gant-Benalcazar had killed all 3 of them. Investigators now thought they understood what had happened.
Sean murdered the Sheltons. Tim Parlin was a party to that murder. And he planned it. He facilitated it, he profited from it, he assisted in it.
But you were 100% convinced that it was Sean who murdered that couple.
Yes.
Will he ever be brought to trial for it?
It seems unlikely.
Unlikely because there was no direct evidence linking Gant-Benalcazar to the Shelton murders, and he would always deny he had killed them. Prosecutors would focus instead on building their strongest case, using Gant-Benalcazar's confession to convict him of killing Kathy Blair. But when Sean Gant-Benalcazar finally gets his day in court, no one could have anticipated what would happen next.
Makes you worry because this guy cannot be out on the streets.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to start the trial in the state of Texas versus Sean Gant-Benalcazar this morning.
3 years after Sean Gant-Benalcazar confessed to the murder of Kathy Blair, his trial begins.
Did then and there intentionally commit murder by causing the death?
You never know what a jury's going to do, but it was a very, very strong case.
You're all here today. Assistant DAs Andrea Austin and David Livingston present the state's case.
The man who sits among us in this courtroom, the defendant, Sean Gant-Benalcazar, is Kathy Blair's killer.
How hard was it to be there during that trial?
It was really hard. There were some pictures throughout that I saw that I can't unsee.
There was a car that parked while I was on my walk.
Kathy's neighbor, Rob Leaf, testifies about the video he recorded on the night she was murdered.
And by the time I zoomed back in, someone was already out of the car and was crossing onto the sidewalk.
That someone, the prosecutor tells the jury, was Sean Gant-Benalcazar on his way to murder Kathy Blair.
I just kind of looked through the rooms, you know, and I turned on a couple lights in rooms where I didn't see her.
The prosecution's case hinges on Gant-Benalcazar's rambling 5-hour confession, where he describes breaking into Kathy's house.
She woke up, she lunged at me.
He had a knife out. They fought over the knife.
And I stabbed her in the neck.
He didn't just kind of confess. He straight up confessed to all the details of killing Kathy Blair.
Signed and dated right here.
That confession was vital to the prosecution's case.
He gave enough details in this confession that were kept out of the media so we could show the confession was from the actual killer and that he knew enough about this crime to have either been there or done it himself.
There is no question that this is a horrible, horrible crime.
But Gant-Benalcazar's defense lawyer, Ariel Payan, makes a bold accusation right off the top. That damning video?
She just was trying to fight the knife away from me, and I was...
It was all a lie. A false confession coerced by detectives Israel and Scanlon.
No, I'm just wondering if you use the restroom.
The defense tells the jury that during that 5-minute bathroom break in the hallway, when Gant-Benalcazar was not being recorded, detectives threatened him.
Law enforcement went down there, we believe the evidence will show, with the express idea, plan, purpose, and intent to try to get him to confess to something he didn't do.
They have to come up with something. They have to argue that it's an involuntary statement, but we obviously knew that wasn't true.
The exact words were, "This is important and you're not going anywhere until we finish."
Gant-Benalcazar takes the stand to blame the cops for his confession.
That if I didn't explain a reason for having done it, even though I didn't do it, I would get the death penalty.
And he maintains that it was actually Tim Parlin who killed Kathy Blair on that chilly December evening back in 2014. Were you worried the jury might
You always have to worry with juries.
You don't get blood on your hands and put it on a jewelry chest.
At closing arguments, prosecutors insist Gant-Benalcazar voluntarily confessed and offered details about the crime only the killer could have known.
I think it comes down to credibility.
And hopefully are sitting there thinking, this guy confessed, why are we here?
The case goes to the jury.
When the hours
started ticking away. 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
You feel awful.
Were you worried?
Yes. The idea that he would get out is just unthinkable. I mean, Sean is going to kill somebody else if he got out.
After 19 hours of jury deliberations,
This time I'll declare a mistrial.
a mistrial. The jury cannot reach a verdict.
If one person held out, she didn't want to consider the confession.
I mean, look, that's what this system is about. We're required to get a unanimous verdict. We didn't get a unanimous verdict.
How hard was it to hear that there was a mistrial and you would have to go through it all over again?
Really hard. Yeah, that was tough.
With a retrial in the works and Tim Parlin's trial less than a month away, prosecutors were worried. Could they get any jury to convict either of these men?
Good morning. This man, Timothy Parlin, knew that Sean Gant would go in and murder Kathy Blair.
With Sean Gant-Benalcazar's mistrial still fresh in her mind, prosecutor Andrea Austin is determined to put Tim Parlin away for life. He stands trial for both the murders of Kathy Blair and the Sheltons.
In Texas, if you were part of the crime, then you are also guilty of that crime. You can convict him even if you don't believe he stepped foot inside that house.
Because he was there and he participated.
Correct.
Right.
I'm going to ask you to find him guilty of capital murder.
Detectives were convinced Gant-Benalcazar had killed the Sheltons, but had no evidence to charge him with their murders. So Tim Parlin would prove to be an easier target for prosecutors. Parlin admitted he drove Gant-Benalcazar to both murder scenes, and the car Parlin was driving had Kathy Blair's blood in it.
Oh, he did much more than sit in the car. He's the one who targeted Kathy. He's the one, for whatever reason, said, hey, you know what, this would be a good person for you to murder.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Parlin's lawyer, Keith Lauerman, argues that despite his client having confessed to driving Gant-Benalcazar to both murders, there is no evidence placing Parlin inside the two houses.
He never set foot in either one of these houses. And at the very end, you're going to realize that this man and those hands never participated in any murders.
After a 9-day trial, the jury doesn't take long to reach a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Timothy Parlin, guilty of the offense of capital murder.
Guilty. Parlin is sentenced to mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the murders of Kathy Blair and Sidney and Billy Shelton. 5 months later, Gant-Benalcazar went to trial a second time for the murder of Kathy Blair.
The nerves were much higher the second round.
Well, there's a lot at stake.
There's a lot at stake.
The vehicle parked on the side of the street. It wasn't in front of a house.
Again, Rob Leaf's testimony is critical for the prosecution.
And that at some point, did you see an individual get out of that car?
Yes, sir, I did.
I want you to watch this.
It was a struggle, and I stabbed her in the neck. I didn't.
Look what he does with his hands. He's retrieving a memory, right? Involuntarily, he's doing this. He remembers doing because he's the one who murdered her.
The police wouldn't let me go, is my understanding.
Once more, Gant-Benalcazar swears the cops coerced his confession.
And I come out of the bathroom, they keep saying, oh, we know you did it, there's no doubt you did it, and they keep saying it, and I just got worn down.
This time out, the jury deliberates less than 3 hours.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Sean Gant-Benalcazar, guilty of the offense of capital murder.
We poured our emotions out into this case.
It was justice delayed and, yeah.
But delivered.
But delivered.
Like Tim Parlin before him, Sean Gant-Benalcazar was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
We're pleased. We miss Kathy. This isn't going to bring her back. Our hearts are never going to completely heal.
A few months after the verdict, I spoke with Gant-Benalcazar via a prison video phone. I wanted to ask why. Why would a guy who'd never been in trouble with the law suddenly turn into a vicious killer? Instead, with no evidence of any remorse, he repeated what he told the jury, that he was innocent, the cops had forced him to confess, and that Tim Parlin was the one who had killed Kathy Blair.
When I went to go see him at 4 a.m., he said, well, we're going to go get breakfast, and drove me out to the place, and then said that he had killed her and told me about it.
Tim Parlin confessed to you that he killed Kathy Blair.
Yeah, that's right.
How could you have known the movements of the killer?
Anything that I said was something that either, Tim told me or I just made up.
And not surprisingly, when I visited Parlin at a prison in Northeast Texas,
Hello, how you doing?
He pointed the finger at Gant-Benalcazar and claimed he knew absolutely nothing about the murder of Kathy Blair. After Sean viciously kills Kathy Blair, gets back in your car and drives away, and he goes back to Galveston.
He never said a thing.
Never said a thing.
He never said.
Then he comes back.
Stone cold individual, actually.
Right. You've been described as the master manipulator. That you talked him into doing it.
My IQ is very low, and I have a big heart.
I don't believe that.
It is. It's very low, actually. And I have a big heart, so I'm not the mastermind behind anything.
You're just a big teddy bear behind bars?
Yeah, pretty much.
Rob Leaf is the accidental hero of this story, someone who never knew he'd be called upon to help solve a murder. And you ended up leaving the neighborhood.
I did.
Needed a change.
I did, absolutely.
I would not be where I am as a professional actor and musician without her influence.
Kathy Blair's student, Kristen DeGroot, is moving to New York to pursue her dream of a career in music.
One of my greatest regrets is that I never was able to tell her that she did this for me.
How proud do you think she would be of you?
I hope she'd be really proud of me.
They're just evil people. In the end, there's just two broken human beings who, basically put a path of destruction through, two families.
Two families who will forever share the same tragedy.
They were the best parents you could ever want.
I just miss her. And at the end of the day, she's gone, and I can't call her tonight.
"48 Hours. Don't miss an episode."
You feel like you're in a hole or a sewer, and you're looking up and you're calling out for help from people, and people are walking by, because they don't hear you. I don't think people know how blessed they are to be able to just hug somebody that they love, or to wake up in a house with people that love you. I haven't had the chance to do that in 28 years.
I'm just going to ask you, did you kill Marcus Boyd?
I did not kill Marcus. He was like a friend to me. He was one of my best friends, and I loved him.
In 1994, Marcus Boyd was shot and killed.
Marcus Boyd was shot and killed
when two masked men ran up and shot and killed Boyd.
When he pulled the trigger, I seen the flash. I swear I could almost see like muscle and tendons because the flash was so big. It's like an X-ray.
Could you see their faces? Could you identify these men?
No, I couldn't identify him.
He had an alibi.
I was about 3 miles away at a friend's house.
And his girlfriend at the time provided that alibi.
I know for a fact he didn't do it. He wasn't there. He was not involved.
You agreed to a lineup?
Agreed to a lineup.
I couldn't identify anybody in all of it.
Greg viewed the lineup with Lamar Johnson in it at least 3 times. There's no identification, and that should have been the end of it right there. But it wasn't.
I felt bullied by the detectives.
And only after pressure from the detective did he all of a sudden say, oh, yeah, that guy did it.
I just kept having pressure to go along with this.
He saw his friend murdered. He was scared. He was easily manipulated by the police and the prosecutor in this case.
I had what I believed to be a murderer, and I had an identification witness who I believed was truthful and honest. I presented the evidence I had, and a jury convicted him.
A trial of errors from start to finish.
It was devastating. Since my conviction, I've been petitioning every judge to give me a hearing, and no judge has given me a chance to be heard. The problem is, I don't know what else to do.
I lost so much. Just milestones. Everything that a little girl wishes that she could, experience with her dad.
Our Conviction Integrity Unit found new evidence that will exonerate Mr. Lamar Johnson.
There's something powerful, really powerful in our system of justice when the prosecutor says, we're the ones who made the mistake. We're trying to free this man.
Free Lamar Johnson! Free Lamar Johnson!
It's devastating for me that this man has spent 28 years in prison for a crime he did not commit.
This is really kind of Lamar Johnson's last chance, isn't it?
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Convicted at 21, still locked up at 49, Lamar Johnson has spent most of his life in prison for a crime he insists he did not commit. How do you keep up hope?
I have a choice. I know the truth. I know that I didn't kill Marcus.
Lamar Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder in 1995 for shooting 25-year-old Marcus Boyd on his front porch. Johnson was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. What have you lost?
Time. And there's a closeness between, especially with a father and his daughters. And I missed being able to be a part of their life.
You want your dad to come home?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Brittany Johnson was just 1 year old when her dad was sent away.
It was definitely hard, but I learned to live without my dad.
Kiara Barrow was just an infant then.
We're still waiting. There is still an innocent man in prison.
Kiara's mother, Erica Barrow. Did you think you'd marry him?
Yes, I did. I mean, he was my first love.
Lamar Johnson grew up in St. Louis, consistently ranked as one of the most dangerous cities in the country. His South Side neighborhood in 1994 was battered by high crime and homicide rates. Johnson had steered clear of serious trouble.
He wanted to better himself. He wanted to be the man that he needed to be for his children.
So Johnson, the 20-year-old father of two, worked at Jiffy Lube while attending community college. But he also had a dangerous side hustle, selling small amounts of crack cocaine for extra cash.
Yes, I was making some poor choices then, and I take responsibility for that. But that wasn't the sum of who I was.
Selling drugs wasn't his life. It was just something to help him manage until he could do better.
Johnson's good friend Marcus Boyd, 5 years older, had also started a family and was holding down a solid job at a printing company. And he too sold drugs on the side.
Marcus was like the preppy type. You know, he wasn't very street.
He was a really, really good guy.
Greg Elking, then 30, had worked briefly with Boyd at the printing company. And Elking admits he was an occasional customer. On the evening of October 30th, 1994, he wanted to get high, but Boyd said no.
He was like, we're gonna go to work tomorrow. So we actually sat down on the front porch up on the stairs.
Marcus Boyd's street, Louisiana Avenue, was empty. His girlfriend and their baby were upstairs.
All he talked about all the time, you know, was about his baby and about his girlfriend. He's making me laugh. We're kind of laughing at each other. But all of a sudden he went serious. He was like, oh no.
From the narrow pathway next to Boyd's apartment, two men came out of nowhere, barely visible in the dim light.
These guys, they had completely dark clothing and they had masks on.
Black masks like this one, and they had guns. The men flew up the porch steps, says Elking. One attacked Marcus Boyd.
And he's wrestling with Marcus.
The second gunman grabbed Elking.
And he says, get the up. I remember looking at him right in the guy's eyes. The other guy, I seen him put the gun right up to Marcus's neck area. And when he pulled the trigger, I seen the flash. Boom. The third shot, I kind of seen Marcus's soul just go. And I knew he was dead.
To Elking's horror, both men continued to shoot Boyd, then vanished the same way they had appeared, sprinting down the dark pathway. Surprisingly, the shooters spared the only eyewitness. You say you looked into one shooter's eyes.
All I seen was the eyes.
Could you tell whether he was white or black?
I knew he was black.
When the gunmen were gone, Greg Elking took off in the opposite direction. As he ran away, Elking says he could hear Marcus Boyd's girlfriend screaming. It's still hard to talk about it, isn't it? And where were you when this happened?
I was about 3 miles away.
Johnson says he was with his girlfriend, Erica Barrow, and their 5-month-old daughter, Kiara, visiting friends. Erica says that entire evening, Lamar Johnson was out of her sight just once.
So we were there because he was making a transaction. Someone was coming. And so he was just like, I'll be right back.
Johnson left the house, Erica says, just as she began changing Kiara's diaper.
And I went out to meet somebody that I was dealing with.
His customer picked him up at the corner of 39th and Lafayette, Johnson says. They completed a quick transaction while driving around the block.
By the time I finished changing her diaper, and clean everything up. He's coming back up the steps.
And how long does that take?
3 to 5 minutes. And he's talking, nothing out of the ordinary. He was just normal.
Minutes later, Johnson got a call that Marcus Boyd had been shot. The next day, he learned that Boyd had died. Johnson's own life began to unravel. According to investigators, when they asked Boyd's girlfriend whom she suspected, only one name came to mind: Lamar Johnson. She thought the longtime friends might have had a falling out.
Well, Marcus and I have never had an argument or a fight. I loved him. I had no reason to want to hurt him.
You agreed to talk to the cops without a lawyer.
Yeah.
That was risky, wasn't it?
Well, no, I didn't have anything to hide.
Four days after Marcus Boyd was shot to death on his front porch, St. Louis police tracked down the only eyewitness to the murder, Greg Elking.
How would you describe what you went through that night?
It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in my life.
Shaken and scared, Elking says he was initially reluctant to talk until he met lead investigator Joe Nickerson.
I thought he was this amazing dude. I thought he was like Nick Nolte from 48 Hours out of a movie. He was awesome. I mean, it was somebody that I just immediately admired.
Elking says even though the shooters were wearing masks, he could tell they were dark-skinned black men, but he only saw the eyes of one of them. Still, Nickerson, he says, insisted on showing him several photos. One, says Elking, stood out.
I said, these eyes, there's something about these eyes, and that's all I said.
It was a photo of Lamar Johnson.
And immediately he said, would you sign the back of it? And I said, no, I don't want to sign the back of it.
Why not?
Because I didn't want nothing to do with this, because I couldn't pick out no murderer, and I don't even think he's the murderer. I didn't say he was a murderer.
Nickerson, Elking says, warned him his life could be at risk, telling him that Lamar Johnson was a dangerous man who may have been involved in as many as 6 murders. Attorney Lindsay Runnels says none of that was true.
If they had any evidence whatsoever, then or now, Lamar Johnson would be charged with a crime.
Runnels began working on Johnson's case when she was in law school.
Does he have a record at all for violence?
No. His record is and was minor. It's a possession charge, possession of cocaine, and then a tampering with a license plate.
She says Johnson received probation for those offenses. Still, she says, cops, aware of his criminal record, kept him and young men like him on their radar.
It's just the usual suspects type of round them up and everybody's guilty by association.
But after the murder on Louisiana Avenue, police had a new reason to focus on Lamar Johnson. The victim's girlfriend had given them his name, and now they had what they said was a photo identification. On the evening of November 3rd, 1994, 4 days after the murder, they arrested Johnson along with his friend, Philip Campbell.
I couldn't even understand why. Why would they arrest you?
Johnson's girlfriend at the time and his alibi for the night of the murder, Erica Barrow.
I begged him to get a lawyer, and all he kept saying is, I don't want my mom and stepfather paying all this money for a lawyer. I didn't do it.
I didn't have anything to hide. So, I believed in the system. I believed that if I explained to them what I knew and where I was, that would sort itself out.
At the police station, Johnson agreed to a live lineup.
I wanted to try to be as cooperative as I could. I wanted them to investigate and talk to the people whose house I was that night. I would expect that they would reach the conclusion that I didn't have anything to do with it.
But investigators never spoke to anyone who had been with Johnson on the night of the shooting, not even Erica Barrow. They put him in that lineup. He's the third man in this photo, and brought in Elking to view it. Could you identify anyone?
No.
Altogether, Elking viewed that lineup 3 times and never picked Johnson. Elking was then asked to view a different live lineup. Lamar Johnson wasn't there, but the man arrested with him, Philip Campbell, is number 4 in this photo. Elking still couldn't identify anyone and says he feared he'd let down the detective he admired and trusted.
I felt so bad. I could see it in his eyes, like I hurt this guy. Like this whole time, you know, I've just wasted his time.
Then, according to Elking, he asked Detective Joe Nickerson how he could help.
All that came out of my mouth was like, all right, Joe, if you tell me what the numbers were and I'll tell you if they were correct.
What does he say to you?
He says 3 and 4, and I was like, you're right, 3 and 4.
Lamar Johnson was number 3 in that first lineup. Philip Campbell was the 4th man in the other lineup.
If Joe Nickerson is telling me that 3 and 4 is it, it's got to be Lamar and whoever, Philip, because he wouldn't lie to me. Joe wouldn't lie to me.
So you picked 3 and 4 because Nickerson told you?
Yeah.
We asked Joe Nickerson for an interview. He declined our request, but sent us a text saying in part, I went where the facts, evidence, and circumstances took me. Elking claims he told no one that Nickerson had allegedly given him the suspect's numbers in the lineups. Instead, he told the other detectives that he was able to identify Lamar Johnson because of his distinctive eye.
They had asked me, what do you mean about the eye when you say that you could pick, you know, these eyes? And I said, I don't know, like a lazy eye or something, like it's different from the other.
Dwight Warren, the prosecutor, says he pressed Elking on his identification of Johnson.
I believed Mr. Elking because I looked him straight in the eye and said, you know, I want to know if he did it, tell me you're sure of your identification. Please tell me the truth because I don't want to go and charge somebody who's not guilty.
What did Greg Elking say to you when you said that to him?
Well, quote, end quote, I couldn't tell you, but he told me he was telling the truth, that he knew who did the shooting, and it was Lamar Johnson and Philip Campbell, so I charged them both.
In July 1995, Lamar Johnson went on trial with Elking as the star witness.
If he had backed off of that, I would never have issued the case. So he was absolutely essential.
To bolster the case, one of the witnesses the prosecution called was William Mock, a jailhouse informant with a lengthy criminal history, who claimed that he overheard Johnson and Campbell in a holding cell talking about the murder. But attorney Lindsay Runnell says Mock wasn't credible and that his cell wasn't close enough to hear anything.
Lamar wasn't ever celled with Campbell, and Campbell nor Lamar were ever in the same cell as William Mock. So how could you hear this if it happened at all, which it didn't?
Don't you want to make sure that jailhouse snitch is telling the truth?
How am I going to do that?
Well, you wouldn't put someone on the stand unless you could check out their story, right?
Unless I did check it out. He was in 2 jail cells away. He was in a position to be able to hear that.
Johnson didn't take the stand at his trial. The defense relied on his girlfriend, Erica Barrow, who told the jury he was with her at the time of the murder. It took less than 2 hours for the jurors to reach a verdict. Guilty. Johnson's life had been changed forever by Greg Elking, who says that as he was pointing at Johnson at trial, he knew he had identified the wrong man.
This isn't the dude I seen at all. Because to me, Lamar is not dark and not what I seen.
You had doubts right afterwards. Why didn't you tell somebody? Why didn't you say,
because
I think?
Nobody talks to me. Nobody. Who am I going to tell? I don't know who I could have told.
Did it occur to you at that moment that you might have put an innocent man behind bars?
Without a doubt. Because I lied on the testimony. I lied because I thought I was doing the right thing.
Lamar Johnson was just 21 years old when he was convicted of murder.
At my trial, they did not even present a motive. They never explained why I supposedly did this.
And then, before his sentencing, Johnson received surprising new information that he believed would prove his innocence. Handwritten letters from his friend, the other suspected killer, Philip Campbell. One said, "You didn't do a thing."
He said, "I'm sorry you got convicted for something you didn't do." He said he wanted to come forth, but his attorney wouldn't let him because he thought he could beat his case.
And Philip Campbell was actually one of the shooters.
He was.
Campbell even named the other shooter who was with him on the night of the murder, a man named James B.A. Howard. Johnson now had the names of both shooters. He wrote the judge and asked for a hearing, but his request was denied. In September 1995, Lamar Johnson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Girlfriend Erica Barrow blames law enforcement.
You didn't care to check his alibi. You wanted to blame someone, and you did exactly that. You just flat out didn't care. You didn't care.
Lamar Johnson didn't give up. He became his own jailhouse lawyer, sifting through police reports, trial transcripts, and gathering new evidence. Johnson, with legal help, filed a petition asking for a new trial in 1996. Again, he was denied. Then 2 years later, he would meet another inmate with a similar story.
We were both assigned to Potosi Correctional Center in Missouri. Our friendship was almost instant.
Ricky Kidd, who is also serving a life sentence for murder, remembers when he first learned about Johnson's case.
He said, "I have to go to the law library." I said, "What are you working on?" And he turned to me, he said, "Well, I know everybody says this, but I'm innocent." And a big old smile appeared across my face, kind of like you're seeing right now. And I said, "Well, I know everybody say this, but I'm innocent too."
The two men made a pact in prison.
He said, "Let's make a promise that whoever makes it out will come back for the other." And we shook on it.
The Midwest Innocence Project had already been working on Kidd's case. Before he himself was exonerated, Kidd says he convinced lawyers there to take a closer look at Johnson's case. When that team of lawyers began their research, they discovered that the star witness, Greg Elking, in prison himself for bank robbery, had written a letter to a clergyman admitting he had lied at Johnson's trial. What did you think would happen?
Again, I thought that I would be heard. So it made me even more hopeful that the court would at least listen.
Elking's letter would reveal another reason why he agreed to testify against Johnson. At the time of the murder, Elking had been in serious financial straits. Detective Nickerson and the prosecutor's office put him in a witness protection program. Elking's debts were paid and his outstanding traffic warrants cleared. And that's not all. Whose idea was to give you money, to move you, to give you cash?
Joe Nickerson. They paid my first month and last month's rent for a house.
Altogether, Elking had received more than $4,000. None of that was disclosed to Johnson and his lawyer at trial. Johnson repeatedly asked for a hearing. He was denied, and his case stalled.
I mean, what else is needed? The only thing that I haven't been able to present is DNA. And God, I wish there was some DNA.
Then in 2018, St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner agreed to look at his case. She had created a conviction integrity unit to look at cases of possible wrongful conviction.
And I started seeing some red flags. And I consulted my team, and I said, I think we have a problem here.
One of the many flags for Gardner was the timeline for the murder. Could Johnson have had time to kill his friend Marcus Boyd? Erica Barrow said Johnson had only left their friend's apartment for around 5 minutes.
And you cannot drive that distance. You'd have to be speeding through St. Louis to even get there. And then you'd have to speed all the way back. There's no way you could do that.
But prosecutor Dwight Warren says Erica could have lost track of time, that Johnson could have been gone as long as 15 minutes.
She didn't have a stopwatch. Lamar got into a car and took off.
At Johnson's trial, Detective Joe Nickerson testified that it only took him 5 minutes to go from the alibi location to the crime scene. We asked Chief Investigator Robert Ogilvie from the Circuit Attorney's Office to take us on that same drive. And according to testimony, it just takes 5 minutes to get there. You're laughing.
Yeah, I don't think.
We timed the drive using a cell phone. Yep. 12:55, 13 minutes. 13 minutes one way. That's more than double the time Detective Nickerson said it took. In 2019, Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner's team released a detailed report listing numerous errors that undermined Johnson's conviction.
As a prosecutor, you put people in prison. You don't try to get them out.
As a prosecutor, no prosecutor, I believe, wants to secure a conviction wrongfully, using wrong tactics. That's just not what we want to do. We want to get it right.
Jurors never learned that jailhouse informant William Mock was a racist who had a hatred for black people, nor did they hear the majority of his criminal record. And they were never told Greg Elking had been paid thousands of dollars. Gardner was convinced Johnson was innocent, but when she tried to get his conviction overturned, court after court, including the Missouri Supreme Court, said she didn't have the power.
And when you try to abide by your oath and you're stopped every way, it weighs on you.
In 2021, the Missouri legislature passed a law that gave Gardner and other prosecutors the power to bring cases of innocence to court. A year later, Johnson got the news he had been praying for. After nearly 3 decades in prison, he would finally get a hearing to present new evidence in his case. On December 12, 2022, Lamar Johnson and his legal team gathered in a St. Louis courtroom for a week-long hearing. His daughters, Brittany and Kiara, were in the courtroom nearly every day.
I think we're all trying to be hopeful that my dad gets justice.
One man, Judge David Mason, will decide Johnson's future.
You may be seated.
He has 3 options: overturn the conviction and grant a new trial, overturn the conviction and declare Johnson innocent, or he could uphold the jury's verdict.
What is at stake here with this judge's decision?
Justice and the integrity of the whole criminal justice system.
Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner sat by Johnson instead of her usual seat at the prosecution table. Gardner appointed 2 lawyers to handle Johnson's case, Charlie Weiss and Jonathan Potts.
I took this case because I believe that Lamar Johnson's innocent. I didn't take it because I think he might be innocent.
There was no physical evidence at all connecting Lamar Johnson with the murder of Marcus Boyd, period.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. This is a rather historic moment in this court. This is the first time where the court is hearing an actual innocence claim filed by a prosecuting attorney.
Good morning, Your Honor.
The Missouri Attorney General's office sent a team of their own to argue that Johnson's conviction should stand. In response to our request for an interview, they provided us with this written statement that read in part, "The Attorney General's office has fought to keep a convicted murderer in prison."
But Judge,
Attorney Miranda Lesh told the judge not to trust the witnesses who were about to vouch for Johnson's innocence.
they're going to ask you to believe convicted murderers and gang members. Their evidence is not credible.
Johnson's team calls their first witness. James Howard takes the stand and admits that he's one of the men who murdered Marcus Boyd.
How did Marcus die?
Me and Philip Campbell killed him on his front porch.
Remember, Philip Campbell had written Lamar Johnson saying he and Howard were the real shooters. Campbell, who was later convicted of the murder, took a deal and served only 5 years. He has since died. Howard was never charged with Boyd's death. He's currently in prison for life for unrelated crimes, including murdering another man.
I killed him the exact same way. I fired 2 shots in the back of his head.
But attorneys Jonathan Potts and Charlie Weiss can't rely on Howard's word alone. They must now tear apart the original case against Lamar Johnson. They call Greg Elking, the state's former star witness.
Law enforcement was wanting me to help, and I trusted them. I wanted to help.
Elking told the court that he felt pressured by Detective Joe Nickerson to identify Johnson in the lineup.
He goes, I know you know who it is, and you're just not saying. And this is the part I hate the most. I just remember saying to him, you tell me the numbers, and I'll tell you if you're right. And he did. And I was like, that was it. That was the numbers. And I've been living with it 25, 28 years, and I'm telling you, I just wish I could change time.
On day 3, Judge Mason questioned the original prosecutor in the case, Dwight Warren, about the reliability of Greg Elking's identification of Lamar Johnson.
He told you and the officers that it was based upon him looking at the eyes, because that was all he could see. Isn't that correct? I believe so. And did he or did he not tell you that all of this happened within seconds? Yes. Yes. And that's what you decided was sufficiently liable to seek a murder conviction. To take it to a jury. Yes, sir. 2 perpetrators came around.
Warren admitted to Johnson's lawyers that without an eyewitness, he would never have filed charges in the first place.
Oh, absolutely not. I didn't have any evidence.
You sound On day 4, Lamar Johnson finally got the chance to defend himself in his own words.
So you talked to Detective Nickerson that night, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you talked to
Attorney Miranda Lesh asked him about his conversation with Detective Nickerson a few days after the murder.
I said, man, that boy was my friend. I didn't shoot him. I said, okay. I voluntarily participate in the lineup.
You had everything to lose at that point, didn't you?
I didn't think so.
You didn't think so? You were arrested for a homicide.
I didn't commit the homicide, so why would I be concerned that I had everything to lose?
As the hearing week neared the end, Detective Nickerson takes the stand. The man Elking claims pressured him into falsely identifying Johnson.
Mr. Elking goes, hey, I know who it is. It's number 3 in the first lineup, and it's number 4 in the second lineup.
And did you tell him to say that?
I didn't tell him to say anything.
But Judge Mason had some questions of his own for Nickerson.
Are you aware that all the evidence suggests that your witness could only recognize some aspect of the eyes?
I'm aware of that.
Let's stand up, Mr. Johnson. I'm just curious, because I don't know. What in the world is distinctive about this man's eyes?
Well, you can tell his eyes are different.
Tell me, what do you see?
I can tell that his right eye is different from his left. One is lower or higher than the other.
Okay.
How would you describe the involvement of Judge Mason in this case?
Well, that was one of the most unique things I've seen in any trial I've ever covered.
Columnist Tony Messenger covered the case for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
He didn't just ask questions, he took over the questioning at times and made it very clear when he was believing something and when he wasn't.
After 5 days of witnesses, court adjourned. With his freedom on the line, Johnson was taken to a St. Louis jail to wait for Judge Mason's decision.
I don't know how to not fight for my innocence, to fight for what was wrongfully taken from me.
What do you think the judge should do in this case? Take a look at the evidence at 48hours.com.
It's been really hard. We heard everything in court.
Lamar Johnson's daughter, Kiera Barrow, has finally heard what happened to her father so many years ago.
The misconduct and the negligence that occurred.
The hardest thing was just that Greg lied, knowing that his testimony did put him in jail.
Brittany Johnson believes that Greg Elking's lies robbed her of time with her dad.
I'm very angry.
This is hard.
Yes, it's very hard. I hate that I'm crying right now. The dad is the most important role.
But their wait isn't over. 2 months pass with no decision from the judge. Kiera is hoping it happens soon.
We've been robbed of so many opportunities and milestones. I'm getting married in April of this year. It would just mean so much to me. And I know to my father, to have him there with me and for him to be able to give me away.
Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon in February, Johnson's family and friends returned to the courtroom. Lawyers with the Missouri Attorney General's office fighting Johnson's release are at one table. At the other, the team trying to win Johnson's freedom. Seated next to Johnson, his attorney, Lindsay Runnels.
What should Judge Mason do in this case?
Judge Mason should vacate these convictions, and Lamar Johnson should walk out of that courtroom today.
All right.
After both legal teams were given copies of his final opinion, Judge David Mason announced his decision on February 14, 2023.
After reviewing both the underlying trial as well as the entirety of the hearing, for the reasons stated above, it is hereby ordered that the motion of the Circuit Attorney of the 22nd Judicial Circuit filed herein for the benefit of Lamar Johnson is granted. The conviction of Lamar Johnson in State v. Lamar Johnson, cause 22-941-37068, is hereby set aside and held for naught.
Johnson's murder conviction was overturned. The judge also found that there was clear and convincing evidence of Johnson's innocence. After more than 28 years behind bars, he was more than a free man. 49-year-old Lamar Johnson had finally been exonerated.
Bailiff, this hearing is adjourned. All right.
This time, he would leave the courthouse not in a prison van, but in a black sedan.
When I first met you, I asked you to identify yourself.
My name's Lamar Johnson. I've been in prison for 26 years now.
And if I asked you to identify Lamar Johnson right now, what would you say?
I am a free man, an exonerated man, and a blessed man.
And how important was it to have Greg Elking take the stand and tell the judge what he had done at trial?
That was very important. He intentionally, falsely identified me. But not only did he acknowledge that he made a mistake, he took steps to try to correct it. And I'm extremely grateful to him for that.
And during that time he spent in prison, he says he never forgot about his friend Marcus Boyd, who died that night.
I didn't want Marcus's family thinking that I did this to him, because I genuinely cared about Marcus. Marcus was a good guy.
In the meantime, Johnson is starting over. His friend Ricky Kidd knows it won't be easy.
It's gonna be tough. But Lamar has the ability to adapt and adjust and see new opportunities.
Worked 30 years for the Department of Corrections for pennies. I don't have anything. I hope somebody's willing to give me a shot. I want to work.
You have a date coming up, an important date?
My youngest daughter is getting married, and it'd be nice if I could do something special and nice for them. But presence matters more than presence. And I'm going to make the best of the life I have.
A mother of 6 becomes ill with unusual symptoms.
Doctors were at a loss.
They're struggling to figure out what in the hell is causing this. What is making her sick? Was she murdered by a poison protein shake?
What the hell is in that protein powder?
48 Hours, Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.